Hello, my name is Alexia, and in this video I'm going to be interviewing Kenda MacDonald. And Kenda is the author of a new book called Hack the Buyer Brain, where she brings in psychology and buyer behaviour over marketing automation. Now, the reason that I'm really interested in interviewing Kenda is because I've got several hats. So my background is marketing and I was a brand marketer, but I also now have an online business where I'm extremely obsessed about marketing automation, but I'm also in the business of mindset. So I'm particularly interested in why we behave the way we do. And I was really interested in marketing behaviour, consumer behaviour, back when I was a marketing professional. So I'm bringing all this together today to interview Kenda. And Kenda has got a wealth of knowledge that I think you'll truly appreciate once you see the interview. So without further ado, let me hand over the time that I spoke to Kenda MacDonald all about her new book, Hack the Buyer Brain. I hope you enjoy it. Hi Kenda, welcome to this fantastic chat that I know we're going to have.
I'm very excited. I'm so excited to be here.
So we are going to be talking about marketing automation, consumer psychology, buyer behaviour, consumer decision making, and all that good juicy stuff. I literally cannot wait to have this conversation. And the reason we're having this conversation is because you've just brought a book out called Hack the Buyer Brain. Show us the book. So before we crack on, Kenda, just tell us who you are and why you have come to write this book. What's led to you writing this book?
Right, so I'm Kenda MacDonald. I am the founder of a company called Automation Ninjas, and we specialize in behavioral automation, so behavioral marketing automation. And really my background is actually in forensic psychology. That's what I studied. And I was paying my way through university when I came into the marketing world. And there's something really interesting that happens when you're like really in depth into studying psychology, and particularly forensic psychology, because it's all about the why behind what we do. And I was kind of working, and I could see a lot of the marketing for my previous boss's company wasn't working so hot. And at the same time, I was going through all of the psychology stuff, and I was like, oh, if we just tweak that, then this might happen. And that was a really interesting kind of journey to go along. And then when he shut his business down, I just thought, you know what, we're really good at what we do. I really want to bring behavior into marketing. Let's make it happen. So I was already I had some experience in marketing automation by that point. And I thought, no, we really need to add this behavioral stuff on and see where that takes us. And that was almost 5 years ago now. And it's been an amazing journey. I've loved bringing proper buyer psychology into marketing, and we've been doing it with our clients for close to 5 years now. And so it was finally time to stop researching things, to stop testing things, and to actually just make it available to the rest of the world. And so I've written the book, and it's very exciting. I'm very excited about the whole process, and it's just gone out as well, which is very cool.
Fab. And it's going to be on Amazon imminently as well. So this is a very exciting week for you.
It's very exciting.
Now, I remember coming across buyer behaviour. Well, I did it when I was at university, which was like decades ago now. But more recently, I say more recently, that's not even more recently. But I suppose more recently was when Dan Ariely brought his book out, Predictably Irrational. So I got really excited about that when that came out. And then since then, there's been like Thaler's Nudge that's also come out that's really helping us to think about all this stuff. So they kind of kick-started, I would imagine. You know, when we talk about behaviour economics today, they kind of kick-started the movement and the whole... So what's changed since those two seminal books came out? Like, what's going on? Like, what's the new stuff that's happening? What's changed in all this today?
So technology, really. Okay. Technology has changed. All of the ways that we now, a lot of stuff was very theoretical. So it was like, I think this happens in the brain. And then you do an experiment to validate what you were basically saying, to validate your hypothesis. And you'd kind of be like, okay, the data says that this is happening, but I have no proof that that is actually happening inside the brain. Then technology kind of came along, and we had an explosion in the access to imaging systems, and various different ways that we can build models and do all sorts of cool stuff. And it's really putting people in fMRI scanners and watching what happens to their brain when they do stuff. That has given us a massive understanding into what's going on. So one of the biggest things that's changed recently is some great research done by Brian Knutson. And what he did is he basically put people in an fMRI scanner and got them to make purchase decisions. So we now know the neuroscience behind a purchase decision. So what's actually happening from a marketing, like from a brain perspective, when people are seeing marketing, when people are experiencing marketing, when people are making that choice to actually buy something. That's the change that we've seen. Technology has enabled us to validate the things that we've been thinking. And so we have not just data from experiments, but we also have some of the tech to back that up from a neuroscience perspective. So it's been this amazing, massive boom in all of this like exciting stuff that's happened that's enabled us to really validate some of the things that people have said previously. So, it's actual fact now rather than just a theory or a hypothesis. And that's really what's changed in the last few years. And it's very exciting.
No, I'm very excited about this. I'm imagining, this Knutson sounds completely nuts, actually, and brilliant for it, because he's put people in fMRI, whatever they are, right, the scanners, and getting them to make these decisions. Now, I'm getting really excited, because is he actually making them like browse websites? And how can we overlay that with Hotjar and eye tracking software with the brain? Are we getting that level of detail?
We are getting that level of detail.
Wow.
So he didn't actually get people to browse websites. What he did was actually kind of ingenious. And I love what he did. And I talk about it really often when I do like talks and stuff. And so what he did was he took people and put them in this fMRI scanner and went, okay, I'm going to show you a picture of a product. And then I'm going to show you the price of the product. And then I want you to press a button as to whether or not you're actually going to buy this product, right? With real money. Like, would you pay for it? And all the while they're having this process go through, he's watching what their brain is doing, right? And so what we saw is effectively like when you show people something that they want, you showed them loads of stuff, but the most universal example is chocolates. When you show people something that they want, and this was a nice box of chocolates, the reward centers of the brain lit up. Makes complete sense, right?
Yeah.
You see something you want, you imagine having it, you see it as a reward, especially when the brain is so geared towards having certain things that are going to increase its chances of survival. Makes complete sense that the reward centers are going to fire. But then when he showed them the price, that's what was fascinating, because when he showed them the price, the pain centers of the brain lit up.
Wow.
Okay, so literally the parts of the brain that are responsible for physical and emotional trauma, like lit up like a Christmas tree. So we suddenly now understand that the brain, because it evolved to survive, it didn't evolve to buy stuff, is hacking itself. That's how I came with the title of the book, was because of this. It's hacking itself to get by in modern world. It's only evolved to get us to a point where we can pass our genes on and then die effectively. That's what the brain has done so well. So in order to understand something quite complex like trading money for something, the part of the brain that it utilizes for that price point is actually the pain centers of the brain, because we're giving something away, we're giving a resource away, and that decreases our chances of survival. So what he started to that in itself is really cool, right? What he started to be able to see is he could actually, before someone pressed the button, he could say whether or not they'd buy it.
Wow.
Just from the activation in their brain. And he created what is called the purchase formula. And the purchase formula is from neuroscience, right? The net value of something is equal to the amount of reward activation minus the amount of cost activation. So the likelihood of someone purchasing something is the amount of reward that we've had minus the amount of sort of pain stimulation that we've had. So we've got to see more reward in a product than the price sort of gives us that pain threshold. We've got to have more reward than price before we'll buy something. And this has some really fascinating implications for marketing, because there's a whole bunch of things that we can do to increase the perceived reward that people get and decrease the perceived cost. But what's really important is you cannot remove cost. You can never remove the pain activation, because even if it's 5p, our brain understands cost as pain. So it's not about making your product pricing as low as possible. That's totally not what we're in about. Instead, you've got to make it the perceived reward as high as possible and decrease the perceived cost. There's loads of different ways to do that. It's when you get into implied variables and explicit variables and all gets very exciting. But just having that purchase formula has transformed the way that I think about marketing when I'm doing stuff with my clients. It's transformed the way my clients think about creating their customer journeys. So just that little piece of research has just opened our eyes massively to what's going on. And that kind of level of research is going on all the time.
Yeah. So I've got two things that have come to mind, two questions. I mean, more, but two that have really come to mind immediately is really the need for marketers to really ramp up on creating that desire for your product. Yeah. So if you can really focus on creating desire, and then it becomes, the price becomes a no-brainer, because there's such an excess of desire there that the price kind of falls by the wayside. That's why all these
premium brands are so popular. So like there's no real difference between like a plastic bag like you get from Sainsbury's and a Dolce & Gabbana handbag. There's no real difference between the two. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to get the thing that you're carrying from A to B. But the Dolce & Gabbana handbag seems like such an amazing thing because the reward value is really high. And, you know, the price doesn't matter. People are going to pay for it because its social status is tied into that. And it becomes amazing at that point to start really getting into the nitty-gritty of that.
And just look at the queues outside an Apple store when a new iPhone is released. That tells you everything you need to know about desire and price. So the other thing I was interested in is around the freemium model. And the role of free, and how a lot of marketeers are being advised to have something free like a lead magnet, or to offer something in for free in return, you know, to get people within their funnel, or to really bring them into their world and entice them to have a flavour or a taste of the work that they do, of the product, etc. And so, but when I hear you say about this pain thing, is that if you kind of prime people for the free, you're never triggering that pain thing, and therefore you don't potentially have to work as hard creating desire. And so maybe you're letting yourself down from a marketing perspective by going down the free route. Whereas if you always charge, even if it's a minimal, like a 5p or a $1 for a lead magnet, you're always going to make sure that you, if you know that works, then you know that your marketing is on point, and therefore you're more likely to be able to monetize further down the line. Am I getting to the right? Am I assuming and inferring correctly from that, or? And that's what I'm hearing based on this research. This is how I could use this practically in what I do, for example.
I think yes and no.
Okay.
So the reason free works so well is because it doesn't have any pain activation. And also because it's so hard to get attention in the first place. So it's really hard to get that attention. And if someone is going to be offering something for free, so if my competitor has a book like this, they offer it for free and I'm charging a price for it, they're going to go with my competitor because there's no pain activation, right? So there's that happening. But if I do my job correctly and I say, well, this book is priced at X dollar point, but you can get yourself a free chapter, I can then display the value and create the desire in a controlled environment where I have attention. And that changes the relationship that I have with that consumer, because I have their attention, I have permission to contact them, and I can help build that desire. I can help build that value. I can help decrease the pain cost, and I can differentiate, and I can say this is why this is worth more than what so-and-so is charging, or it's why it's worth paying for it. What's also very important is that if you decrease the price point significantly, decreasing the price isn't always the way to go with stuff. And for the same reason, free isn't always the way to go for stuff. If you decrease the price point significantly, it actually can sometimes, in certain instances, decrease the perceived reward value. So there's another piece of research, and I cannot remember the lovely guy's name, but it's in the book. He took people and put them also in an fMRI scanner. And what he did is he displayed the importance of pricing when it comes to people's enjoyment on things. He gave people the same wine. He gave
this people sounds like a great guy.
I know. He gave people a very expensive wine and a very, very cheap wine, and told them this is the such and such a dollar wine, this is the such and such a dollar wine, and then watched their brain. The people, even though it's the same wine, it's literally
it's the same wine. Okay, you missed that bit. It's the same wine.
It's the same wine.
Okay, he lied to them.
Their brain, he was totally tricking them, but their brain kind of activated that they were enjoying the wine that was more expensive way more than the cheaper wine, even though it was the same. So the brain actually perceives reward for more expensive things, because we've been trained to believe that sometimes price is tied into the value of a product. So we have to be careful in this whole relationship, and we have to balance it, and we have to always make sure that the amount of value that we're offering matches the pricing. So there is a subset of marketers who will just say, just put a zero on it. Just put a zero on, just double your prices, just do that. Yes, that technically works, but not always, because you have to have the value and everything's got to look the same. This is when we come into implied variables, implicit and explicit variables.
Okay, so explain those two terms. You mentioned them earlier, and that was one of my other questions. Like, what are they? What are they, for those that don't know?
So explicit variables are all the stuff like language, right? So when you're looking at branding, when you're looking at this cup, for instance, right? Mrs. Always Right, that my husband likes to make me tea in. If we have
Wise
a look
man.
at this cup, the implicit stuff is all the stuff that makes up, like it implies, it creates the frame that our brain understands where this fits. So it might be the things like the color on the cup. It might be the things like the type of font that they've chosen on the cup. So all the things that our brain is automatically looking at and goes, oh, this is like that. This is like that. This is where it fits. And it's creating this implied perception of what this cup is and what its worth is. Whereas the explicit stuff is things like language, like really telling people really explicitly, this cup is this and it's worth this. So Adidas did an amazing thing on this with their dynamic pulse shower gel. So they had a specific target audience, and it was like the manly man target audience, not the type of person who's going to go to the shelf, pick up a bottle of shower gel and read about why it's so amazing. They're just not going to do that. They just grab something, throw it in their basket, and then walk off, right? They don't want long choices. There are other things that they're worried about, and it's not the type of shower gel that they're using. So Adidas were like, how do we corner this market? And they did. They managed to completely niche the market. And the way that they did it is they had this bottle, and it was they very specifically chose the colors. They very specifically chose the way it feels when you pick it up. Very specifically chose the noise that it makes when you open it, and the way that you go about opening it. And what they were doing is all of those things that we don't actually think about, we're not actively thinking about that, all of those things were chosen to make it look like castor motor oil, right? Which is their target audience. Their target audience knows what that bottle looks like and uses that bottle very often. And they chose the premium version of the motor oil. So when people went to the shelf and they saw all the other things, the castor motor oil was in a silver bottle. The Adidas Dynamic Pulse Shower Gel was in a silver bottle, same black label, very similar look on the front, very similar shape to the bottles, and it makes the same noise when you open the cap, right? So all the implied variables between the two, the Adidas Dynamic Pulse is saying implicitly, I'm like the castor motor oil, right? Explicitly, it's called dynamic pulse, right? So people are like, oh, okay, explicitly, I know that sounds interesting. That's kind of what I'm looking for in energizing shower gel. And that fits the frame perfectly of what that target audience is looking for. So when we are pricing things, when we are looking at, like heightening the price of something, all those implicit variables need to line up as well. If you are saying that your service is worth $50,000, but it doesn't look like it's worth $50,000, people are going to go, nah, I don't trust that. So you can't just add a zero onto things. Everything's got to match up really nicely. But there is a very good and strong relationship that price has to the value or the perceived value of a product.
Now that's an interesting example, the Adidas one, because they've just basically sort of given something that people have got there's a place in their mind already allocated in terms of the positioning of Castrol and a male kind of area of consumerism, let's say. So they've kind of created a very clear shortcut to going, hey, and so they're taking advantage of like established shortcuts that are already at play, rather than trying to create something new and establish something new. They're just kind of cheating almost by styling into but a very different sector. So I'm sort of thinking about shortcuts. There's one thing that you cover in your book is biases and cognitive biases, which is our own shortcut. So I'd love to talk about bias and cognitive bias and how they come into play as part of bias psychology. So could you just explain what those are? Because I've kind of implied what they are a little bit, but I'm sure you'll be able to talk about them much more eloquently than I can.
So this research was originally done by Daniel Kahneman. And his Thinking Fast and Slow is a great resource that everyone should read. And it was Kahneman and Amos Tversky. I can never pronounce his surname. I hope I've done that justice. And they proposed that there was a duality of attention, that there's two systems that we use to pay attention to the world around us. System 1 and System 2, very inventive names, right? And System 1 is like a really fast system. System 2 is much slower. System 1 is very often referred to as the automatic system. System 2 is the manual system. And the real difference between the two is that System 1 takes in 11 million bits of information per second. System 2 takes in 40 bits of information per second. And so we often refer to System 1 as the autopilot, when you just do things automatically, and System 2 as the pilot. And the kind of difference between these two is we like to think that we're these really cognitive beings and that we swan about, being able to make all these amazing cognitive decisions. We only spend about 15% of our day in System 2, this really intensive cognitive system that deals with all this problem solving and deals with different scenarios. Most of our day we're spending in System 1, and System 1 takes in all that amount of information, so that 11 million bits of information per second. It can only do this because it creates a series of rules and mental shortcuts. So when you are a little kid, you learn that hot things need to cool down before you have them, right? So we learn that hot stuff is dangerous and we need to be careful. That's a rule. That's a rule that our brain puts in place. So when it sees steam rising off of something, we don't immediately put it in our mouth. We test it first, right? We do this with much bigger things like driving. When you first learn how to drive, it's very difficult. It's very intensive. That is System 2. Learning how to do everything. It's massive cognitive capacity being required. And it's very difficult when you first learn how to drive. Once you've learned how to do it, everything goes over to System 1. And then you're in System 1 and you can drive and it's no problem. You don't have to think about any of that. Now, in order to do that, we have these rules and we have these mental shortcuts, and sometimes they go wrong. And we have things called cognitive biases because these rules and mental shortcuts do go wrong. Okay, so we have heuristics, which are all the rules that we utilize. We have all these different rules, and then we have the cognitive biases, which are slight corruptions in the rules or slight errors that we make every now and then. And there's a few different types of them. And so things like the anchoring bias. So I also call this a heuristic because it happens so often. So let's say you're looking at something, you Google something like best zombie movies, and you type that into Google and you're looking at the results and you click on the first piece of content, and that will give you a list of, let's say, 5 different types of zombie movies. That's your anchoring point now, because that's the first piece of content that you've looked at. And so everything else that you look at after that, you're comparing to that first piece of content that you've already seen. This works for pricing. When you see the price of something and it's crossed out, even though it's crossed out, that's your first anchoring point. Then when you see the price that it is now, then you can compare the two and you can go, oh, okay, this is this and this is this. I'm getting a good deal. And so the anchoring, this is an amazing bias that we should all be utilizing as marketers. The Economist did an amazing thing on this. They actually screwed up big time. I think Ariely covered this originally.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and what they had that their online subscription was $59. Their print-only subscription was, I think it was $125. Don't quote me on that. But that their print and online subscription was also $125. So when people hit that pricing page, they go $59, $125. Oh, $125 for both the print and the online. That sounds like a good deal. And so most people took that option, the one where the two were bundled together. A very small percentage of people took the online only option. And then no one, a full 0%, took the one where it was just print. No one was having that because it didn't seem like a good deal. So the powers that be decided this is a non-converter. Let's make the sales page prettier. Let's take that pricing option off. And suddenly what happened is when people hit the page, they saw that $59 and then $125 for both. And they went, okay, well, I'm having the cheaper option. And suddenly the majority of people were now going for the cheaper option and a minority were going for the more expensive option, where it was the other way around previously. And so people had anchored on that price and they'd created a frame and they could compare the two. And now they couldn't do it because they're taking that option. So the economists put it back, and gave them a 42% boost in profits by just having that thing that wasn't converting, just having it there so that we had an anchoring point that we could compare things to. This is also called coherent arbitrariness. So it's a completely arbitrary baseline that's been put together, but we've made something in our brain where we're comparing them and going, oh, that's a good deal, when actually it makes perfect sense to just buy the cheaper option. And we do it all the time.
So I'm just thinking, in a marketing context, you can start quoting higher prices earlier on, let's say on a sales page, and then later reveal. So we see that quite a lot. Then also, maybe if you do offer several options, like in this situation with The Economist, if you don't have maybe a third or a higher one, it's probably fair enough to maybe artificially create a higher version, just to create just to create something that enables the anchoring to take place, basically.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? Something that is a complete guilty pleasure of mine, and my husband hates, and I love it, and I do this very often when I'm in America, is I watch the QVC channels.
Oh, yeah. Like the infomercial type thing.
The infomercials, yeah. I love infomercials. They are a lesson in marketing. They are a really good lesson in marketing because they do this fantastically. But wait, there's more, right? That is precisely what they're doing. They're anchoring you. They very often anchor you on the high price. And then they tell you, no, it's not that price. You'll get 2 for that price, right? Which means you're getting it for this price. You're not. You're still paying the same amount of money. You're just getting 2 things, right? But they do it really, really well because they anchor you on that, and then they tell you all these other amazing things. So your brain's like, whoa, look at all this amazing stuff that I'm getting. Unfortunately, we've learned how all of that works, or fortunately for a lot of people, we've learned how all of that stuff works now. And so we've created little rule sets where we're like, wait, this is suspicious. Right? So we have to be careful about the way that we do this. And I think as long as you're doing it so that it provides value to people rather than tricking them into something that is of no value to them, then you're on okay moral stand ground.
But what I'm hearing here is maybe having lots of bonuses that you offer with your thing, rather than maybe bundling it in as part of your service, is actually separate. Even if it's part of your service anyway, but maybe just describing it as a bonus instead. Helps you to kind of create that, there's more stuff.
Exactly.
So lots of yeses there. So that's how I'm going to write that down. Add that to my sales page.
It's increasing the perceived reward.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's increasing that I'm getting this additional reward. So interestingly, just having a conversation with my team before this about a client of mine who has recorded a great, he went and did a great talk. People paid to go see the talk. Now he's got the recording of that talk. Should he charge money for it, or should it be for free? And should it be like bundled in with other services instead of it being a separate product? Well, in order for us to like add any kind of value to it, yes, it does need to be charged for. And so when we bundle it in, we can honestly and truthfully say that it's worth 50 quid because that's, so if we're bundling it in with things, it does have to, you can't like bundle stuff in that's already free because it's not really increasing the perceived value. So you do have to bundle things that are worth something, that have a monetary value, and don't just pick one out of the air. Sometimes you look at sales pages and you go, you've just made that number up. So make sure that it is something that is of value, that you're already selling or that you already have listed somewhere else, so that people can be like, oh, I am getting value with this.
So going back to cognitive biases, are there any more interesting ones that marketeers need to be aware of that you can? Oh, yes. Brilliant. I'm all ears.
So, okay, there's 2. Okay. So the anchoring effect is one we've already covered, so that's number 3. But now we're going to do 1 and 2.
Okay.
So 1 is called the representative heuristic. Okay, and so this is the perfect example you have in your head of something. So anytime you compare something, so if I say, picture something that is round-ish, it's green, and it tastes very nice. The first thing you think of is probably an apple, right?
It wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Was it? What was it?
It was a pea. Have I ruined it all now?
A pea, you've ruined it completely. No. The reason we use that example is because when people picture something that is round and green, they picture one of 2 things, either a tennis ball or an apple.
Okay.
Not peas, thanks. Or we can use the example in countries that use more cricket, you can use the example of something that is round and red and gets given to teachers. right? Then people think apple, right? Not a cricket ball, but it could be a cricket ball. And so when we are thinking of something specific, we always have the perfect example of this in our head. That is the representative example in our head that we have of that. And whenever we come across, our brain stores this. So whenever we come across something else that is round and green, it goes, is that a tennis ball or is that an apple? Right? Because it has these two pictures in our head and it compares it and contrasts it and creates a frame around that. But also, let's say if I'm saying to you, old people, right? An old couple. You're probably going to think, most people think of a kindly old couple, depending on how they were brought up, a kindly old couple. Or you ask people to picture an old man and they might think of like the old man from Up, you know, the They might think of that kind of image of an old man. That is the representative. It is the best example for that category, and the brain stores that. So whenever it has to think about old people, has to understand a situation in which there are old people, it's going to compare it to that representative thing, right? This goes wrong, and this goes horribly wrong, like really horribly wrong, in scenarios where, let's say, someone is being convicted of war crimes. So they're only being convicted like 40, 50 years after the fact. So they look like a kindly old man, but they're not. They might have been a general during Nazi times, right? So at that point, like we will give people much more lenient sentences because we have this picture in our head of a kindly old man. Whereas if they were much younger, they were like a complete skinhead, they had their hair shaved off, they had like evil tattoos all over them. I have lots of tattoos. Tattoos aren't evil. But like, let's say they look like the definition of a villain, of like a Nazi villain that is now used in movies, we'd give them a much harsher sentence because that is the representative of that category. So we can use this in our marketing, right? If we are trying to get people to do something specific and we are trying to fit into a category, then we should make sure that all of the signals, all the implicit signals that we are using fit that category. And we also need to remember that what is the representative of that category? So if the representative of a certain category is not what you are trying to get someone to do, then you need to align the two better. So for instance, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Let's say I'm wanting people to see somebody as really, really like a bad person. And I'm creating a movie for something and I wanted people to see something as a bad person. If I put a very stereotypical, very camp, very stereotypical guy in a great pink sweater and a lovely blue top and like really snazzy shoes. If I have this really stereotypical character in the movie and he's the villain, no one's going to say that that's the villain. No one's going to twig on it. It doesn't fit the category. Our brains are very stereotypical. Our brains can be very racist. They can be very sexist. They can be very homophobic. And we have to push back against that because of the representative heuristic. But as marketers, we can take advantage of that in making sure that our websites look a certain way. Do our websites fit a certain category? Does all of the terminology match that category? So if we're trying to say to people that we are such and such a company and we work in this industry, do we fit that industry? So you can still differentiate yourself, but there are some things that you've got to make sure that you're fitting within the category so that the brain doesn't go, I don't trust this, it's wrong. So yes, we have to push against stereotypes, but we can also use the representative heuristic to make sure that we fit within certain things because brains need that. They need the context. They need to understand what's going on all of the time. And then the second one, go on. Do you have
I did. I was from a branding perspective. My background's branding, so I'm immediately thinking, well, hang on a minute. How are you going to stand out? How are you going to, there's it's those that break the rules that really are able to kind of stand apart and get attention. So suddenly, if you've got to kind of look the part, then suddenly do you not then risk being vanilla and then not standing out?
No, you want to look enough the part that people go. So let's take Apple for instance.
Another apple. We can't get away from apples.
We can't get away from apples at all. But Apple, the software company, right?
Yeah.
So we take Apple and we have a look at them and we're like, okay, they really broke the mold for software. However, now at this point in time, if they want to release a new product, what do they have to do? It has to fit the Apple branding. It has to fit the Apple everything. So they broke the mold a little bit, but they still retained a lot of the stuff that was required to fit in with the software company. So you can differentiate yourself. It's not about not differentiating, like 100% you have to differentiate yourself. You have to make sure that you stand out, but you still have to have certain things that are considered part of that category so that you can become the new norm for that category. Because ideally what you want to do with your branding is you want to replace whatever that image is with your image.
Yeah.
That's what Apple did. They retained enough to be still considered a software company, but differentiated most of it so that they became the new norm for that designer-led software company, which is what Apple originally started, like targeting all the designers and the people who wanted to be slightly different. So you've got to toe the line with it. You've got to make sure that you fit enough in a category, but enough that you stand out so that people pay attention.
So that's a fine balance, actually, for marketers, isn't it? It's a fine, because it's not like there's a rule book with that stuff written in.
No.
And it is going to be a bit of a test and learn approach, isn't it? Where you test it, gauge the response, and then tweak and as you go. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Frank Kern fan in any means. I'm just not. But what he has done very well is he has emulated by the way he looks, the clothing he wears, the photographs he takes, all of his personal branding is emulated towards what he wants people to see him as, and that is as a successful businessman. So he's done a really good job with that. And a lot of entrepreneurs do a really good job with that. And all they're doing is they're helping fit into the perfect category of someone who looks successful.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
No, good personal branding stuff there as well. Now, I'm just wondering, what's the third one? Because we've still got to talk about cognitive bias, and I do have some other questions I want to ask you as well.
So the third one is the availability heuristic. And the availability heuristic is the fact that we have certain amounts of information available to us that it's already stored in our brains, and other information needs to be collected from outside. If something is very readily, if an example is very readily available and we can pull that up from our memory really easily, we assume that it's more likely, right? Okay. We just assume that it's a more likely thing to happen. If the example isn't readily available, then we assume that it's not likely to happen. Okay. This is why case studies are so important. So let's say I'm trundling along and I need to go and I'm a prospect in my audience, marketing automation, and I need to go and do some stuff. And I've had a really bad time with marketing automation. All of the available memories are negative, which means I'm going to be very negatively biased towards marketing automation. So when I'm looking for experiences, I'm looking for something that's going to help me replace what's currently available with a more positive experience. Okay. And that availability, I can sometimes supply. So if you don't have enough positive stuff, I can supply testimonials, I can supply case studies, and I can help you bring up a much more available, much better memory because it's right in front of you. So I'm kind of helping you with that little bit of available information. But it also means things like, this is in branding, coming back to the branding, this is what we call owning a certain part of the target market. So Coca-Cola does this really well, because if you say like a brown fizzy drink that's very sweet, the vast majority of people will say Coca-Cola. They're not going to say Pepsi, they're going to say Coca-Cola. And that's because Coca-Cola, and all of its original branding, really owned the look of the drink. And it still happens in a lot of stuff. They're always pouring the Coca-Cola so you can see the color of the thing. And so that image is most available. And so when people are thirsty and they're thinking about a soft drink, the most available image comes to mind and they think, Coca-Cola. So one of the ways that we can do this is to always be showing up in certain places. And this leads to a cognitive bias called the mere exposure effect. And the mere exposure effect is that the more often you expose somebody to something, the more they like it. So you just show them the same picture over and over and over again, and eventually they'll start to form a positive association with that picture. It might mean nothing, but the fact is they have a positive relationship with that. As businesses and as people, as marketers trying to sell products, this is a great example for why content marketing works so fantastically, right? So by showing up all the time, by being there all the time, by having your brand front and center, by being there ready with pieces of information when people need it, the more often that you can get people utilizing your site, your service, the more likely they are to buy from you because they've created a positive association just by the fact that you've shown up. And that's because of the availability heuristic. But it also means that when you get people actually using something, so like they've just purchased something, you want to get them using it as much as possible, not just to form a habit, but because the mere exposure to that means that they're more likely to like it.
So now I'm racked with guilt with the need to go on social media every hour of the day to be constantly present in what I'm doing.
That's where you should be using marketing automation and using a scheduling system instead.
No, I am doing that as well. I'm just the guilt. I was on a holiday recently and I wasn't enough on social, and it's like, oh my goodness.
You should definitely use a scheduling system.
I know. It just, sometimes it feels so fake, doesn't it? I think that's the thing with automation, is that there is a need for being human in all of this. And actually the human piece is such an important part in terms of creating a connection, an emotional connection. And when we start using a lot of scheduling tools, and sometimes I think when you're actually sharing something there and then in social, because you're literally engaging in that moment, I think there's a very different, you'll write something very differently in terms of the post, you'll be doing something very differently. Whereas when you're writing for something in advance, I don't know, I write a very different piece of content. It doesn't come out the same way. It's not as emotionally compelling, I find. I go back and
you should be writing those posts at that point in time and then putting them in a scheduling system for later so that the post goes out again.
I have done that, and then on the day when it's about to go out, it's like, no, actually I need to change this. So, but it is about the human bit. I just want to dwell on the human bit as well, because all of this automation can take out the human element. And I think with one thing that's happening a lot in marketing is that some people are becoming a little bit savvy to this automation that is happening. And especially when you think about bots on something like the Facebook or bots that are happening on people's websites, and how that can maybe make people fall out of love, especially when automation goes a little bit wrong and it's not maybe been set up correctly. So, but also the idea that we need to be doing more, personalizing marketing much more, and taking the individual approach much more. So how can we marry this kind of automation approach, which talks about maybe setting into place something that is a one size fits all, for want of a better word, to making sure that you are taking on board the human element and personalizing it as much as possible? How can you kind of reconcile those two and still achieve the results that you need?
I think it's creating a customer journey, and it's being really clear on what that customer journey is and where you're going to automate parts of it. So considering we specialize in marketing automation, we've only found that customers only don't like the marketing automation that is done badly.
Okay.
So if you have spent time really personalizing something right from the get-go, customers love it because they have a great experience. Like when we've had some amazing feedback from the thank you email from buying our book. Like I get so many responses from the thank you email, and so many people like, I love this email, it's so great. And all it is a really personalized thank you that I've written out, and I've chosen a little GIF that I've put inside it that says, oh my God, thanks. And it's got a little thing that says, like, let me know what your social details are, and I'll post on Facebook about, or on social, whatever your social channel is, about the fact that you've bought the book. I get almost every single person who has purchased the book has replied to that email. I spent time personalizing that email. Everyone knows it's automatic because it happens straight away. Yeah. It's not like they're fooled about the fact that it's automatic, but people love that. And I get that engagement through from that, which is really, really important. So I think the only bad automation is automation that effort hasn't been put in to think about the experience that the customer is going through. Yeah. Customers don't mind an automated experience. They mind a bad one.
Yeah. And I'm glad you made that point, because actually a lot of my emails, I take a lot of time writing the stuff that I've got in my email sequences, and I get so many replies from people.
Exactly.
And they what always surprises me is they're replying in a way like they think I've just sent them that email. Like if they sign up for a freebie at my website, then I'll go, I'm just checking that you got this, and da da da, and then I'll go off and say something. They're like, oh, thank you so much for checking in with me. Yes, and they answer all my questions, and they come back, and I'm getting too many of these emails, but actually I'm not really complaining. But I think you're right. It's if you take the time to connect, take the time to do it right, then actually it can work for you. So that's really, really cool. 100%. So so that's answered that. Now I'm thinking about AI and voice assistants and all that kind of stuff that's kind of really coming through now. We're really, voice is really coming through in quite a big way, and marketers are starting to sort of adapt it and really incorporate it. Now, obviously this is all about algorithms. So I'm just wondering, at the moment we're talking about hacking the buyer brain and,
Yes.
and really understanding how consumers are making those decisions. But not in the not too distant future, it won't be a consumer making that decision. It'll be AI making that decision.
Yeah.
So, are you going to be bringing another book called Hack the AI? Or how do we, what do we do when we're actually marketing to a bot, not to a person? How does that affect the bias factor and everything that you're talking about?
I think the fact is that we're still creating the bots.
Okay.
So they're going to have all of those biases built in that we're creating for anyway.
Yeah.
So they're still going to go for the best example. So let's say we're selling 4 handbags, from 4, like on a scale of 4 different things. And that bot has to decide on what its, person that it's buying on the behalf of would most like. It's going to go for the criteria that is set by that person originally. So if you're going to be marketing to bots, what you've got to have is real clear messaging that really conveys the benefits, and make sure that you have that cost and reward relationship really clearly laid out, which is precisely what you have to do for humans anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't really think it's that different.
No. Point well made.
I think it's pretty much the same.
It's the same. We're making the bots, so because we have all the. I'm just wondering, because we're not always aware of our biases. That's the thing. A lot of these cognitive biases are subconscious, so we're not really consciously aware of them. So when we're programming a bot, we don't know we don't know about these biases. Should we be putting those in? So maybe we're going to miss out and not put them in.
I was talking at an AI event. I'm actually speaking at it in a couple of weeks' time. I'm doing the same talk that I did a month ago. Because it was so popular, which is great. And the talk that we were kind of discussing was that should we be creating AI to help us make better decisions? Humans are awful at making decisions. We are so bad at making decisions. If we're given a really difficult decision to make and the brain doesn't know which way to go, it just won't make it. That's it. It just doesn't make it. It goes, can't be bothered. And distracts itself with something else and switches that problem out for an easier one, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. So should we actually, in all of this AI, all of the stuff that we're creating, what should we not actually just be creating AIs to help us make better decisions? And so that was the argument, can we make ourselves better consumers with AI?
That just seems like such a wrong thing for us to try and do right now with the planet. Overwhelmed with stuff, but an interesting question to try and solve.
No, but from a moral standpoint, I think it's our obligation to help consumers consume better, not in terms of consume more, but be more conscious about what they're consuming. To be clearer, like, right, this product that you're going to buy here, this is the cost of it to the environment. This is why you shouldn't do this. This is why you should think about doing this. So in all of this, like really tapping into what's happening currently with all the meat debate and all that kind of stuff, I'm a massive carnivore. I really enjoy eating meat, but I understand that that's not kind on the planet. So could supermarkets be helping me make better choices when I'm doing my online shopping about substituting some of my meat options for some vegetable options? Doesn't mean that they have to lose money, because some vegetable options are ridiculously expensive. But it could just be a way that, could we be helping, as consumers are going through the consumption process, could we be helping them make better choices as they're doing that? Things like Google does this really well. Not in an artificial algorithm sense, just in the way that its food bar is laid out. So if you go into Google's food bar, what they were finding is they have this free shop that you can go to and you can get all your food and everything from, and the company just pays for it. There's no charge for any of that stuff. What they were finding is that all of the, mostly the techies, there's a surprise there, were going in and just eating all the junk food. And none of the healthy food was getting consumed. And this was a concern to Google because it wants its employees to be healthy. So what they did instead was they made the junk food harder to reach. And they made the healthy food easier to reach. So the healthy option was the easiest option and the junk food was the harder option. People started eating a lot healthier food. Right? And this is the kind of stuff that we can be doing to help people make better decisions, is by just tweaking things ever so slightly to help consumers be better. And it's why Thaler and Sunstein spoke so heavily in Nudge about how it's an ethical consideration, because you're helping people make choices. You have to be ethical with the approach when you're helping people make a decision.
The problem there is that some companies are always going to be going for the high margin option, no matter which way you cut it. There's always going to be
go large.
The pure consumerist capitalist route, which actually now is backfiring massively in our faces. So thinking about that, what do you think now? We need to wrap up because I know we could talk for hours, Kenda, but we do need to wrap up. Just to finish off, like, what do you think would be one of the biggest marketing trends coming through to it that we're facing right now? Do you think the next thing on the horizon we need to be taking into consideration?
So there's a great piece of research by Walker Research, and they said that by 2020, customer experience is going to be the number one deciding factor, and so that's over price and quality of the product. I think we're already there. It's 2019 now, but I think we're already at that point and have been for some time. The second someone can pay more for a better experience, they will. And I think experience is just going to become more and more and more and more important as we're going ahead into the future. And so we will always do the thing that's going to get us the best experience possible within the price bracket that we can afford. And so I think that is a marketing trend that we're not paying enough attention to. And I think that businesses aren't trying hard enough to give that amazing, personalized, fabulous experience that consumers so desperately want. So I think that's a trend that we can utilize, that we can jump on top of, and we can be ahead of. And so I really feel like marketers should be focusing on understanding why we need that experience and creating the experience as best as we possibly can. And then AI will feed into that. But AI is only feeding into that because it gives us a better experience. We're not going to do things that give us a worse experience. It's always going to be for the better experience. Everything else really is a buzzword around the core purpose of experience. So I feel like that's the biggest trend that we're not really paying attention to as well.
So what you touched on this just a minute ago, actually. What about the trend of the conscious consumer then? And the rising of us being more mindful and conscious about the impact of our buying decisions?
I think it's awesome. I think it's really, really cool. I think it's a great time to be a consumer. It's a difficult time right now to be a business, but it is a great time to be a consumer. The internet has given us access to information on a phenomenal scale, and we are demanding that from businesses. We're demanding clarity and we're demanding transparency. As a business, that's hard because you have to you're under the microscope all the time. And so the best way to be really clear about this is to be really transparent about it, to be, to get ahead of that, is be like, we make these choices because of this. This is why we do this, because of this. And to really explain that. And if you are making the right choices for your target audience, they will flock to you because you're giving them the opportunity to be a conscious consumer. And so I think it's a great trend, and I think businesses should really embrace it because consumers are only going to be pushing more that way. We've been kept in the dark ages. We're coming through now. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so thank you, Kenda. This has been brilliant. We've just coming up to about an hour, and I think we need to probably wrap up at this point. Now, just to finish up, show us the book once more, and also do tell us any useful links or anything where people can get hold of the book if they and have a read. I know that I literally cannot wait to go and read it now it's out.
So you can go to hackthebuyerbrain.com.
Brilliant.
That is the website for the book. You can get the book from there. There will shortly be a link on Amazon for that as well. And yeah, you can just go and get that. There's a bunch of resources on there as well. So there's a free chapter download on that site, and then the copy of the book itself. And then once you've read the book, it points you to some additional resources that we talk about within the book that you can download for free too. So there's a lot on that little website.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Kenda, for joining me. This has been so fascinating. And yes, I could carry on for hours more, but we will wrap it up now because I'm getting a bit hungry and it's lunchtime. So thank you. And I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
That's all right. Thank you so much. Take care now.
Bye.